bhavatu sahano bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great strength, vigor, energy. May our study be full of illumination. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is, as I pointed out before, this is Vedanta series question and answer. And so I can wait for some questions. I think there's one question from here. So the question is, does love need an object? You know, whenever anybody asks a question, we have to make some definitions. All right, what do we mean by love? If I had a little sense of mischief, which I do, I might ask the questioner, what do you mean by love? So maybe we can do that.
A sense of compassion, loving beingness towards others.
Yes, okay, all right. So this is an expression of love. Compassion will be an expression of love. It seems to be an expression of love. The problem with the English word love is it means different things and it can be applied in many different contexts. I have heard some people say, I love chocolate. All right, in which case, clearly, there has to be a subject and object relationship. All right. So, what does we mean by love is more of a difficult question, really, to pose and to answer. And we know what love is, but we can't really measure it necessarily. We can maybe measure the effects. We can see how much compassion we have and all the rest of it. But it's one of those intangible things. Can you prove? See? So some people say, I love you. The other person might be tempted to say, can you prove it? And the proof will come in actions, no doubt. See? If I say, I love you, and then you say, please will you make me a cup of tea? And I say, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm not sure if I really have this love down pat. And then the confusion comes with words. Some people use thinking for feeling and feeling for thinking. So when you say, I feel something, it really means I think something. And then some people will say, I feel something, they really mean I think something. Or the other way around, vice versa. In the context of the Vedanta, we have to understand that the principle is oneness. And when we come across any concept or even indeed any understanding of oneness, then subject and object is evidently gone, because then it's no longer one. Now, one method to understand this oneness, of course, will be the favorite and most convenient path that we have, and that is Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. We can call it the yoga of non-demanding love. But there's another kind of so-called love which is demanding. That's why we have to make the distinction. Most human love is a bargaining process. I love you if you love me. When you stop loving me, I hate you. So that causes a number of difficulties. I think over 50% of people who get married in the United States of America get divorced. I think it's 50 to 54%, something like that. That's part of the social culture now. You somehow fall in love. That expression itself should give you warning signals. And that falling business. And then after some years, you see, because some people fell in love with molecules, and the molecules become dimmer as the age goes on, and eventually you lose love or attraction for the molecules, and then a person might start looking for other molecules. But is that really love, you see? So love involves a great deal of sacrifice. It's similar to the question asked last week, actually. And a willing sacrifice. So non-demanding love conforms to the definition I gave you probably last week. I can't remember when. And it is not my definition. It comes from Swami Vivekananda. But I think it's the most complete definition of the most perfect love. There's a kind of triangle of relationships. I'll put it on the board for convenience sake. So the relationship that Swami Vivekananda puts out is like this. No fear. No reward. And no rival. That puts some religions in trouble. Because if religions declare that they love you, and yet they install any fear, that is a reward or punishment, a simmering, boiling pot called hell, then that fear is installed and reward also is installed. So an incentive is put there, and rival is there because only my religion is true. So these kinds of religions cannot have love on the one side and a loving God on the one side and fear on the other side. You can't have a God that says, I love you, but if you don't believe in me, then despite the fact that I love you, I'll put you in a boiling pot or roast you on the barbecue of heaven and for eternity where you'll burn and scream and cry. What kind of love is that? And Jesus would put it very beautifully that if a child asks a father for some bread, he won't give a stone with a curious sense of humor where you grind your teeth to nothing and break all your teeth and all that. No, I'll give you bread. This Pater Noster prayer, this Our Father, give us this day our daily bread. So it's a confident assertion that we'll be looked after. And we can take it also in the mystical way. So in terms of Vedanta, the Bhakti, yes, love has an object. I'm the lover, and the object of my love is the beloved. But when that relationship becomes closer, becomes more revealing, becomes part of a mystic union, as it must, where the lover and beloved merge, and where lover and lover are transcended. Lover and beloved are transcended in pure love, and every religion will state God is love. God is love. If God is love, then there's no subject to object. There's no dependency. There seems to be a dependency in the religion, a very sweet dependency. God needs my love. I need God's love. This is a beautiful relationship that culminates in a realization that that entity is love itself. You have some examples of that, yes. The sun beams. It doesn't require an object to beam. The sun does not need the earth, but the earth needs the sun. And so when we put it in a dualistic relationship, yes, we are dependent on love. We are dependent on divine love. But from the lover's point of view, the beaming, radiant point of view, the radiator of it, in the example the sun does not need the earth. Because at that point, there are absolutely no two. But what do we mean then? And how do we come to a conclusion that God is love? We look at the world, we can't see much of the love sometimes if we look at it in a certain way. But part of that love is freedom. And the unlimited freedom that we call the highest principle exhibits itself through our limited freedom of choice. We can't blame an unsuspecting sun if we decide we'll have a nuclear war and blow the whole world up and destroy its environment. And then we point to the sun, any survivors, and say, with an accusing finger, why did you do this to us? The sun will in all his innocence say, well, I watched all the events, and it's you that you did it, not me. I gave you all the energy. I gave you the beaming, the radiance. I arranged things in such a way that no particular part of the globe called the earth will get hotter than any other. The same principle that makes me alive and light revolves the earth in such a way is kind of like a rotisserie where no particular part bakes to death, not like some other planets who only see the one side and extremes of temperature. Right now we're exploring Mars. Extremes of temperature are there. And many of our sister and brother planets will have extremes, unbearable extremes, making things non-habitable. Mars ultimately could be habitable and might also in the past have been so. Must have had a climate like that, possibly, or at least the potential for one. What we call life, of course. We're not talking necessarily of humans. Bacteria also are life. One single rod-shaped bacteria will be about half a micron in width and 1 micron in length. Undetectable to the human eye, that billions and billions have found a residual home on your skin, and you have no idea about it. But when two people gaze over the candlelit table and look into each other's eyes, they have no idea that this beautiful smooth skin is crawling with billions and billions of undetected bacteria, all feasting nicely. And the same goes with mites, all kinds of skin mites, mites on the eyelid and so on and so forth. All of this is bypassed in nature's conditioning. If we had realized that, then this idea, this candlelit thing that happens and responds to nature's distractions, this is what we call Maya. So what is the best definitions that we can find of this love? We have to resort, I should say, to two texts. And you can see that one refers to the other. I can start with Swami Vivekananda's Bhakti Yoga. And he starts off, where is that Bhakti Yoga? Did I bring it? Or perhaps I never brought it here. Yes, if you can get one from the library, that's fine. Anyway, he starts off by trying to define what is love. That's the first thing. Now, of course, in doing this, he has to refer to this Bhakti Yoga Sutras, the Narada Bhakti Sutras. It starts off, Atato Bhaktim Vyakhya Sha Maha. No, right, Bhakti. Thank you. Right, good. So, this book, Bhakti Yoga, Swami Vivekananda's first chapter, is on definition of bhakti, love. And here he refers to the definitions that Narada gives himself. He says that Bhakti Yoga is a real, genuine search after the Lord. So in answer to the question, this kind of love requires two things. It requires a subject and an object. A search beginning, continuing, and ending in love. What a beautiful statement. Beginning in love, continuing in love, and ending in love. But what is this thing called love? It's not an object of our scrutiny. Since it's qualia, it is subjective feeling. One single moment of the madness of extreme love to God brings us eternal freedom. He gives an extreme statement right up in the front. Bhakti, says Narada in his explanation of the Bhakti aphorisms, is defined as intense love of God. Intense love of God. So, every one of these sutra texts begins with this atato, this now. After acquiring the competence, that means, of mind to understand the path of devotion, having been prepared to deviate all our love for objects, external objects that the senses present, having decided that something deeper requires our love, and also because it is the easiest, most natural path leading to the goal of God realization, Bhakti, the path of devotion. Yakyas Maha. We shall explain the meaning, and this is how it's explained. So, the definition comes after quite a long commentary on this, which we can go back to. It says, Sa Tasmin Parama Prema Rupa. Bhakti has been described as the supreme love towards Him or God. The supreme love. We understand small loves, even love of chocolate we understand. Human love we understand. Love for a child we understand. Love for an animal we understand. But let's look at those bases. We love animals because they don't answer back. You can't have an argument with a dog unless it's an aggressive one. A dog wants to please you. A dog loves you more than you love the dog, I hazard a guess. A dog will follow you everywhere. It will look with appealing eyes, asking, what next? And curiously cock its head and saying, probably internally, we're assuming, you look like an interesting person, but I'm waiting for a response. And all the dog is seeking for is affection. And it gets rewarded for it. When you train a dog, you train it on the basis of reward and possibly restriction or punishment. So there is a motive behind the normal human idea of love. So it is worthwhile reading a certain commentary on these Narada Bhakti Sutras. What is the definition of devotion? A question is asked. And in this sutra of supreme love that we have given you, the definition is given in the briefest possible term because of sutra. Sutra means a thread. That devotion is of the nature of supreme love towards God. It has a very significant meaning. First of all, it says that love is to be supreme. That means that if you have an argument between intellect and feeling, feeling should win. Swami Vivekananda says, if I were to choose between the head and the heart, it would have to be the heart. I'm sorry for you people intellectually based, but that's it. The qualification supreme makes a lot of difference. He doesn't just give a secondary kind of flaky word. He uses param, supreme. It is not ordinary love, but supreme love. Ordinary love we can understand, but supreme love, what is that? What is the idea of this supremeness of love, is the question asked. It is supreme in the sense that it is not only quantitatively supreme, that is, it's all. Every religion will state that in its own different terms. In the Jewish biblical texts we find, Deuteronomy, you shall love your Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, or your mind, or your strength. And if you take that as a supreme commandment, no other commandment is necessary. Everything should flow from that. When Jesus was asked, what must I do to gain eternal life? What do the scriptures say? Well, it says, love your Lord your God with your whole, yes. And the second, close to it, love your neighbor as yourself. And then it goes into a story, what is your neighbor? So this love is not merely a very intense love. The deepest possible one, its quality also is different from ordinary love. How to distinguish the quality of love? Take, for instance, our love for earthly relations, says the commentator here. There are several forms of it. Love of the mother for the child, love of husband or wife or vice versa, love towards one's parents, love towards friends, love for wealth, love for name and fame, and so on. All these can be brought under the term love, but they're not necessarily supreme love above all else. So what makes love supreme? The commentator questions. Except the supreme love, every other type of love is egocentric, self-centered. When we say we love somebody, it's really, I love myself. That's mostly what it is. So in this love, is there a subject or object? Yes. I, the object, I, the subject, make myself the object. I love myself. And this bargaining process that I mentioned really makes that very clear. This egocentricity. I deserve a reward. So, but on here, you see this idea presented. No reward is necessary. That means I love you whether you love me or not. It makes no difference. The sun beams, using that example, whether you know it or not, whether you thank it or not, whether you appreciate it or not, still radiating there. And if you say, we think of this love as something that every vessel, every instrument, every hand, every head, every eye, every ear, pouring generously without any favor, without any judgment, without any criticism, investing in your life, whether you're virtuous or otherwise, still digesting your food, still pumping your heart, still giving you all the resources for growth around you. Imagine, nothing conditional about it. No reward. Religion might put that in, but you see it falls short of this ideal. So it is all selfish love, to put it bluntly. Only this love for God is pure, unselfish. There may be objections to that. People may say that there are instances of unselfish love in our earthly relations also. If you discuss with a materialist the idea of complete selfless activity, complete selfless love, they will say, no, our human experience is that there's always some motive for doing something. You might establish some kind of orphanage in the dark regions of Africa, but they will say this missionary endeavor is for conversion's sake. Or you might establish a great hospital and be known as a great benefactor, but that's the trick. If there's no plaque in the entrance of the hospital, you won't be interested. Your name has to be inserted there. And then there's the indirect thing coming up in casual conversation. People should donate to charity. Yes, I believe people should donate to charity. In fact, I myself, then it comes on to your own philanthropic works. Be boosting the ego, not done silently, not done anonymously. And then there's an example the commentator gives here. For example, a mother's love for the child is, of course, unselfish. That's the only real example we have. A wife's love for her husband can be unselfish. The husband's love for the wife may be unselfish. So it's all right to call such love unselfish love, or when there are instances at least, though may not be usually found, of unselfish love. The question, challenging the statement that this human love is selfish. And the answer to the objection is no. All these different types of love are selfish at the core. This is because they're all centered around the person who loves. The mother loves her child not simply because it's her child, but because it is her child. We can easily have genetic love, but Every animal has it. A mother dog will protect her pups, attack forests. So love is centered around selfish love, tinged with some kind of selfishness. And the question of I, me, mine comes first of all in such cases. Everywhere, except for this relation, love cannot persist, not in its pure form anyway. So you find this. Even a mother will boast, my child is special. The inference is, all the other children in the kindergarten class are not. A child loves a beautiful doll, not simply because it's beautiful, but because it is her own doll. This idea of possessiveness is always associated with such love. So we call it selfish love. Every other kind of love is selfish except this divine love, which doesn't have any relation with the self. When we love God, we love Him not because He is my God and not someone else's God. I love you, I love my God, I hate your God because it's a different God. Here that possessiveness is not there in pure love. And when we think of love for God, it is obvious that we do not possess God, but we love Him because God is lovable, worthy of love. It's put here worthy of love, but I'm saying lovable. Why do we love God? Because God is lovable. We love Him because He's the only object that is worthy of our highest love. For that reason we love God. And that is what is meant by dear not for the sake of anything else, but dear for its own sake. There's a quotation from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Yajnavalkya is about to depart for intense spiritual life, having done all his household duties, and his wife Maitreyi asks him about this, why would you do this, and what is the meaning of this intense sadhana, and detaching from the normal events of the world, the normal things that people find precious. And he makes that statement, not for the sake, and he takes examples, not for the sake is the husband dear, not for the sake is the wife dear, and he goes on like that, but the sake of the self, because that is what sits behind everything. And when we say the self, this is our philosophical term for God. It's dear for its own sake. So God is dear to us because He is God and nothing else. Now you may also object, and many people do, to this word God because it holds baggage. But when we're talking of this kind of God, we're not talking of an extra cosmic creator God outside everything that we occasionally visit, and occasionally He visits us. And we like to visit particularly on a Sunday or a Saturday or a Friday, depending if you're Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. And then when we're in trouble, bring him out of the closet. Come, help me out here. Generally though, ignore him. Go back in the closet and sit there, please. Wait until I call you again. I will summon you when I need you. What kind of love is that? It's not that kind of thing. But the word God in English comes from the Germanic hut, G-U-D, which also comes from the Sanskrit hutam, the one worthy of offering to. There's only one entity worthy of offering to, because that entity is love. So there's no other kind of selfish relation associated with this. Thus, since it is unselfish, it is supreme in quality as well as quantity. And then the commentator says, in quantity, because we don't see any instance where earthly love makes one so much forgetful of oneself. It's not the mother's love for the child. Is not the mother's love for the child unselfish then? He repeats this question. Yes, it is the firm answer. That love is unselfish to some extent. Perhaps It's the best instance in earthly relations of unselfish love. The mother doesn't expect anything, any return from the child, at least at the time when the child is young. But when the child grows up and becomes a useful member of society, the mother may well expect some return. Even then, it's not unselfish because that idea of possession is there. Minus is there. And that child is her child. And so her love goes toward the child. In other words, it is love for herself, finding expression in a kind of transferred matter or manner. But every creature has its genetic love. A bird will protect its own chicks, but fight and bite against any other intruder or any other chicks. Now, occasionally, of course, you find the exceptions. I've seen various films where animals which are natural opponents looking after each other and bringing up cubs and other creatures like that. But I can't help thinking about the animal psychology of it. A mother's instinct mistaking this entity for its own and bringing it up as its own, and still protecting it against any other entity and still distinguishing it from any other species from there on. Still you have that selfishness. Can't get away from it. But this is the organic selfishness. This is genetic love. And the human has the capacity to go beyond the mere genetic drives that biology presents itself with. The child is only an extended personality of the mother. So as she loves herself, she also loves her child, and thus it becomes selfish love. Everywhere, therefore, love is tinged with this selfishness in our earthly relations. It may appear damaging, perhaps it may disappoint many, but if we analyze and go deep into the matter, it will be found to be true. Then the commentator brings up the next doubt. Has this earthly love any similarity or comparisons with divine love? No, it hasn't, not directly, because in our love for God, the idea of possession does not arise. But we can use these human relations as examples. We can put ourselves in a loving relationship by being God's child or being God's friend or companion. But you see, there's always the other side of it, because the corresponding move toward us or flow toward us is absolutely unconditional and unlimited. It was always there. We have to be a recipient. If you want to catch the sun's rays, then you have to open the windows, isn't it? You have to go outdoors. It's no good saying, "Oh sun, you never gave me any life or sunshine." And the sun says, "Well, where did you situate yourself?" Well, I situated myself in the darkest cell and cave that I could find and never ventured out of it. I heard that was such a thing. But I never really felt the rays of the sun or went outside. There are some people who have phobias like that also. What about instances of the lives of the gopis of Vrindavan? And yesterday we were talking about that in the life of Holy Mother. After the Master's passing, she took on a pilgrimage, and her grief intensified because she felt the pangs that the gopis felt. And certainly in the Bhagavatam, we find this beautiful, beautiful instance of these gopis overawed with love, saturated with love. So the gopis are used as illustrations of love. Even there we find that there is a sense of possession, though. That possession, however, does not limit the object of love to one individual alone, because Krishna made himself multiple Krishnas to satisfy the gopis. there was an equanimity of love, just as the rays of the sun doesn't judge where its rays fall and who deserves it and who doesn't. It's indiscriminate in this regard. So everybody knows that God is not an individual's God only, but is the God of everyone. None will have the foolishness of possessing God all for himself or herself. Though it gives a sweet coating to call him one's own. On a personal level, it is a sweet coating, but this is still minus. It's still but this minus is not selfish, because everybody is aware that God is not one's own only. Is it really true then that all our earthly loves are selfish? If it is selfish, naturally we cannot put such a high value to it. And if it is unselfish, then it is not love worth the name. If I don't consider somebody as mine, my love for that somebody will be only superficial, says the commentator. And there cannot be depth in that love. The more the depth, the greater, and more the idea of possession in superficial human love. The more the depth, the greater and more the idea of possession. That is all very obvious. But yet, you do not see through this veil. The veil makes it appear very noble, very pious, and makes it, say, almost heavenly. But then have we probed into the interior of the matter? The idea of mindness is always there, without which this earthly love cannot exist. Just go back to Swami Vivekananda and see what he has to say on this. When a man gets this bhakti yoga, this love of God, he loves all and hates none. He becomes satisfied forever. Can you see the distinction? This love cannot be reduced to any earthly benefit, because so long as worldly desires last, that kind of love does not come. All along, every yoga requires this detachment, this renunciation. Now, people balk at the idea of detachment, but bhakti yoga has the sweetest kind, that is automatic. You attach to this supreme entity and direct all your energies in that way, and all the little loves get left off by themselves. And I always remember a conversation with a devotee, and I remember clearly it was almost a casual conversation. The man was taking me to the airport. And he said, you know, I feel I should increase my tapas, my spiritual practice, my discipline, my self-control. Because all tapasya is a question of controlling the urge for lust and greed, the urge for desires, the urge to move toward. But I said to him, but are you not a devotee? That means yoga. You see, in an ashram where this person was, there'll be all these opportunities for every kind of path, a kind of balance. Meditation in the morning, washing the dishes and do karma yoga throughout the day, work and pray, as the Benedictine monks will tell us. This balance. And then also, is there not a sweetness, an underlying love in all these activities? Do you not sing songs? Do you not chant things? This is in the context of an ashram he was staying at, a volunteer. Yes, I do all those things. I said, you see, if you really have this love of God behind all these activities, meditation, karma yoga, etc., etc., then you don't have to do this kind of tapasya. Because automatically, love of God saturates the soul, as it were, and displaces all the other things. Any human examples for that? Yes. Supposing you fall in love with somebody, and then somebody else comes along, and you fall in love with them, and then what became of the love of the first person? It drops off by itself. In your own human growth, you had a love of toys. In adulthood, it gets displaced by the love of golf. In Zimbabwe, we call golf damn it, by the way. Because when people started watching colonial people play this game, hitting a ball, and they were trying to describe it to their friends, they said, we think this game is called damn it, because every time we hear somebody try to strike a ball, he said, damn it, and misses. So all we have done is displaced our little small loves, things that were important to us, and displaced them with bigger things, better things. A man's physical love for physical things that even a dog has, a rapacious appetite, is replaced by a love of culture, art, and that is displaced in turn by a love of God, where this art and culture is seen as an expression and food is seen as a manifestation. So it says like this, Bhakti is greater than karma, says Swami Vivekananda, greater than yoga, that means meditation, because these are intended for an object in view, while bhakti is its own fruition, its own means, and its own end. Bhakti has been the one constant theme of our sages, and apart from the special writers on bhakti, such as Shandilya or Narada, the great commentators on the Vyasa Sutras, the most abstract explanation and collection and orderly structure for the Upanishads. Even these Vyasa Sutras evidently advocates of knowledge generally, the path of jnana, have also something very suggestive to say about love. Even when the commentator is anxious to explain many, if not all of the texts, so as to make them import a sort of dry knowledge, the sutras in the chapter on worship especially do not lend themselves to be easily manipulated in that fashion. There's not really much difference between knowledge or jnana and love, bhakti. As people sometimes imagine, they think these are two divergent paths, either this or that. And so he says, we shall see as we go on that in the end they converge and meet at the same point. So also is it with Raja Yoga, which when pursued as a means to attain freedom, and not as unfortunately frequently becomes in the hands of charlatans and mystery mongers, as an instrument to hoodwink the unwary, leads us also to the same goal. But the one great advantage of bhakti is that it is the easiest and the most natural way to reach the great divine end in view. And its great disadvantage is that in its lower forms, it often degenerates into hideous fanaticism, and you might even say weakness and dependency. So there has to be some balance involved in it as well. And then he goes on to say like this, the fanatical crew in Hinduism or Islam, he says Mohammedanism, but conventionally we now say Islam or Christianity, have always been almost exclusively recruited from these worshippers on the lower planes of bhakti. That singleness of attachment, nishtha, to a loved object, without which no genuine love can grow, is very often used also, or is very often also the cause of the denunciation of everything else. All the weak And undeveloped minds in every religion or country have only one way of loving their own ideal, and that is by hating every other ideal. And so we can see that even in this religious love, in this religious devotion, there is this selfishness as well. And nothing is conforming to this in that sense. So I think that would be the answer to that question. All right? Okay. So now we have just a few more moments, like about 15 minutes, which is available for any other questions or clarifications.
You explained on other talks as well that Krishna explains that Bhakti Yoga is the easiest for everyone almost.
Yes, yes.
But if I don't understand or realize or know something, how can I have Bhakti with that? So how to start in this path?
Okay. So we start by understanding the lovable nature of what we call this entity. And that means we have to observe things very carefully, not take things for granted. So it starts off with a sense of thankfulness. Actually, it's the formula I use, which everybody by now knows or should know anyway, called oats. So when I meet people, I often say, did you have your oats this morning? So what is oats? I put it on the board here so we know very clearly. This is repetition, but to no harm. We also have to bear in mind what the commentator on the Narada Bhakti Sutras has just said. He quoted the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Not for the sake of whatever your relationship is, not for the sake of the husband is the husband dear, but the sake of the self. That means that behind the physical, behind the mental, behind the personality, behind the mask, persona means mask, is an entity that sits there. That's God. Seeing that God in all things. Learning the art of doing that, not taking things at face value. So in order to appreciate, we have to have the capacity to observe correctly. Oh means observe. If we say see God in all, how can we observe that? It's very clear that the eyes don't shine by themselves. And we recently completed the study of the Kena Upanishad. The central question is, willed by who or willed by what, you see? Does the will go toward its objects, or the mind or the attention go towards its objects? And then the whole passage is an elaboration of that. Because behind the eye is this internal entity that drives it and expresses itself. When we catch this idea that the whole of the universe is an expression, a loving expression of that entity, then we are getting somewhere. So we have to observe things carefully, observe the things that we normally overlook and take for granted. Many people pass lawns where grass is growing. If you look at the thought for today, you'll see that. But you see, to our eye, it's just something green that we pass maybe every day. But to a cow, it's something delicious. And to an ant, it's something to climb up on. And how is this a great, great miracle, a great beauty that we missed? And how is everything arranged so well? And how is it that this entity, this loving entity, is a good investor and still invests life in you without asking for any reward? So it begins with an understanding of, or an appreciation of, this immanent presence of this Lord, invisibly there, no doubt, but expressed as you and as all the world. Now, if you have even a shred of doubt about that, of course, now and then we catch it. Now and then we get an inspirational moment. Now and then we catch the beauty of, say, of nature. And we get an internal shift upwards. But to sustain that, when we have around us all kinds of difficulties and troubles and so on and so forth, we're preoccupied with that. So I often give the story, I can tell again. Two people walking in a park on a summer day. You know the story by now. And all the opportunities are there available for all the senses to understand and appreciate. On a summer's day, everybody's mood lifts. Coming from Zimbabwe, I often wondered about all these songs about summer. I never understood it till I came to this country. What an elevating thing it is. Everybody's smiling. On the contrary, in some Scandinavian countries or countries really, more in the Arctic Circle and things like that, I'm told that for 6 months of the year, people are absolutely miserable and depressed. Actually, depression is a real issue in those countries. And then the sun is there blazing. You don't know what is night, what is day. Those extremes are there. So this environment has an effect on us, unless our attention is diverted somewhere else. A summer's day, two people walking in a park, blue skies above. They have the opportunity to feel the sun's rays on the skin and the warmth of it. They have the opportunity to smell the beautiful scents of roses and flowers of different varieties, lavender, etc. They have the opportunity to hear insects buzzing in the distance, pleasantly humming, and the birds' sweet song of different types. You see, if you're a bird watcher and you go out into a forest area with a bird watcher or an ornithologist and you know nothing about birds, you'll miss all the bird song. And the expert will say, you hear that? And they'll identify the bird. Then they'll say, you hear that? That's a different bird. That bird's replying to this. Our attention isn't tuned into it. So that's the problem. The problem is our attention isn't tuned in to love manifest and expressed, pouring through every limb, pouring through every blade of grass. That's what we fail to notice. Coming back to our story then. So on this idyllic day, where the foot falls on the ground, in my estimation, it's a crime to wear shoes on grass or on the beach. When I first came to Ireland, it was in the winter, of course. I headed for the beach. We're a landlocked country, so a beach is a great treat. And to feel the breeze and see the wind coming in, but of course the temperature is not very pleasant, and a howling wind with grains of sand, nicely doing a sandpaper job on your face, and all that is there. Coldness is there, but there's no way I could ever walk on that beach with shoes on. I had to feel the sand on my feet. And I was sitting there, bare feet, and a dog came up and sniffed the feet nicely. And the owner said, I apologize. My dog has never seen naked feet on the beach before. Because all of these Irish people were walking with shoes on this beach and couldn't feel what I felt, the connection of the foot on the beach, the sand. So all of these sense opportunities are open to people walking in a park on an ideal day with all of these sights, sounds, pressures, touches, flavors, all of these. The chances are two people walking in this ideal condition are oblivious to all of this. They know nothing about this because they're talking about the COVID virus, or they're talking about a legal issue, or they're talking about financial issue, completely oblivious to this whole thing. So when we start tuning and learning the art of tuning our attention into the glory that we find all around us. What a pity transforms into what a glory everywhere. And whenever we feel this water of glory, what do we find? We go to the next one. When we observe correctly, then we appreciate. And when we appreciate, we become thankful. If you put an S on, then we have oats. And if you're not practicing oats, it is difficult to love God because you can't understand the lovability of that entity. Pouring through us free of charge, digesting our food free of charge, not charging us a toll for every heartbeat, not giving us tax for the air, making sure that every cell of the body is made pliable by the influx of water and providing that water for us. When you see this at the microscopic scale called man, and then scale it up to the entire universe, this feeling gives us a sense of wonder also. So we have a sense of adoration, wonder, and thankfulness that spontaneously arises. We don't have to artificially cultivate it. But if you really are stuck, then this is where you pray. Let me love you. Grant me a yearning heart. That's the idea. And the more we do that, the more it comes to us. And there are various ways, if you're mentioning the 12th chapter, various ways of doing that. The primary formula is fix your attention, fix your mind. Fix the attentive part of your mind on me, says Krishna. That's the point. So why don't we love God is because our attention is either not fixed at all on it, but fixed on other things, or is partially fixed from time to time. And we need to elevate that into absolute fixture. Now we can go into this in more detail next week because the Narada Bhakti Sutras that discusses this also will give us the formula of how to do this. If we look at the content of the Narada Bhakti Sutras, we find this subject coming up. So, how to attain supreme love is a subject that is mentioned. And we can just explore just briefly. And we can continue with this next week if you choose. So it starts with a sutra that says, the great teachers describe in hymns and songs the following as the means of attaining supreme love. And then it goes on, what is that? To attain supreme love, a person must renounce the objects of sense pleasure as well as attachment to them. So we can ask what exactly is meant by the objects of sense pleasure and attachment to them. Well, Sri Ramakrishna used to refer to them as worldliness, and worldliness he would define as lust and greed, two genetic directives that move us on in biology. Love for the world. As long as we have a love for the world, we cannot have love for God. That's the plain fact of it. And when love for God increases, then love and attachment to the world decreases in a commensurate, quantitative way. Love is big for us, the world is small for us. If the world is big for us, God is small. Supreme love is attained by uninterrupted and constant worship of God, thinking of God all the time, bringing the memory back. This also is mentioned in the 12th chapter as Abhyasa Yoga. That is, when the mind wanders, bring it back to a state of observation, appreciation, and thankfulness. By hearing of and singing the glory of the Lord, even while engaged in the ordinary activities of life. If you have a mantra given by a guru, then with great love, great affection, great feeling, continuously repeat that loving name of God and always internally sing the glories. Always sing strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony. Use your aesthetic sense to do it. And then, in brief, he's going on to the next one, saying the principal means of attaining this love is the grace of a great soul. If we take, for example, the example of some of these great souls, if I take, for example, the great souls in my own life, there are at least two most influential souls in my life. One is my Diksha Guru, who gave me mantra Diksha, who was the embodiment of love. Why else would any Guru do it? Except for love. If we take, for example, then the love of my Sannyas Guru, this is the father and mother to me, both. And of course, the greatest souls of all would be the incarnations. Vivekananda said, nobody loved me more than the Master, referring to Sri Ramakrishna. It's hard to obtain the grace of a great soul, says the Narada Bhakti Sutras, continuing, because it is hard to recognize such a one, because these may well be hidden. They won't necessarily express themselves fully. But if a man receives his grace, the effect is infallible. The grace of a great soul is required. In the Oriental traditions, a guru is required. In all traditions, a guru is required. It's just not emphasized. In Christianity, it's called confessor, spiritual director. These are various terms. And then the word guru has gotten a bad name from the 1960s, 70s onwards because of commercial guruism. But a real guru is somebody who is a self-effacing person who is working for the good of humanity. In other words, is love personified. There's no selfishness in it. That's how we recognize it. Naturally, you learn to love if you come across somebody who is the embodiment of love. And through the grace of God alone, an aspirant attains the grace of great soul, and that is why it's necessary to pray. Won't you show me a loving, yearning heart? The Vishwaswara Tantra, we find the following chant to the Guru, translated as, him I bow down to, the perfect Guru, who is absorbed in the bliss of Brahman, who can bestow that bliss upon others, who is free from our earthly bondage, who is the self of the highest wisdom, who is beyond life's sweet and bitter, who is air-like, untouched by evil. Often the scriptures speak of his nature, saying, thou art that, calling him changeless, pure, eternal, the one without a second, witness of all the mind's moods and motions. How shall thought compass or tongue describe that one? So that we have all the characteristics of such a great soul that is required. And then finally, seek therefore the mercy of a great soul. And that really is the entire text, the entire answer really, of how to attain this supreme love that we call Bhakti. All right, I hope that was useful and helpful. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.